There is a specific kind of silence that money buys, a vacuum, sealed quiet that exists only in places where a handbag costs more than a Honda Civic. It is a silence that smells of imported leather, white tea, and aggressive air conditioning. I stood in the center of the atrium of Aurora Heights, letting that silence wash over me. To the 3,000 people currently walking through the automatic glass doors, this place was a temple of consumerism, a cathedral of glass and steel rising 4 stories into the skyline. To them, it was a place to be seen, a place to spend, a place to aspire to. To me, it was just asset number 4 in the Skyline Group's portfolio. I looked down at my reflection in the polished black marble of a fountain ledge. The man staring back at me didn't look like the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar real estate conglomerate. He looked like a man who had perhaps taken a wrong turn on his way to a dive bar. I was wearing a charcoal hoodie that had been washed one too many times, the fabric pilling at the elbows. My jeans were faded, frayed at the hems where they dragged over the heels of my scuffed running shoes. I hadn't shaved in 3 days, leaving a dark shadow of stubble across a jawline that was usually sharp and clean-shaven for board meetings. This was my uniform, not the bespoke suits tailored in London that I wore Monday through Friday, but the armor of anonymity I donned on the weekends. I adjusted the hood, pulling it slightly further over my forehead. It was amazing how invisible you could become simply by looking like you couldn't afford to be there. I watched a security guard, one of my employees, technically, though he was contracted through a third-party firm, eye me suspiciously as he rolled past on his Segway. His gaze lingered on my hands, which were tucked deep into my pockets, before he decided I wasn't worth the paperwork and moved on to harass a group of teenagers near the food court. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. It was a strange masochism, coming here like this. Most men in my position spent their weekends on golf courses in the Hamptons or on yachts in the Mediterranean. I spent mine haunting the corridors of the empires I had built, looking for cracks in the foundation. And I had found a crack. A big one. I pulled my phone out. A cracked model from 2 years ago that I used specifically for these excursions, and opened the monthly performance report for the tenants on the 2nd floor. TechVantage Electronics. On paper, they were the golden goose. Their revenue was up 40% quarter over quarter. They were moving high-end inventory, 85-inch OLED screens, professional-grade audio equipment, the newest flagship smartphones, at a rate that baffled my analysts. In a retail climate where brick and mortar stores were dying a slow, painful death, TechVantage was thriving. Their lease renewal was coming up in 6 months, and my board of directors was already drafting a contract to lock them in for another 10 years with a significant rent hike. But numbers can lie. Or rather, numbers can hide the rot. Over the last 3 months, the Aurora Heights guest services email had received a slow but steady trickle of complaints. They were never about the products. They were always about the atmosphere. Phrases like unwelcoming, hostile environment, and aggressive staff appeared with alarming frequency. One email, sent 3 weeks ago by a local school teacher, simply read, "I have never felt so small while trying to spend so much money. I will not be returning." I swiped the screen off and shoved the phone back into my pocket. Profit was good, but reputation was everything. Aurora Heights wasn't just a mall, it was a brand. We sold luxury, yes, but we also sold an experience. If a tenant was poisoning the well, I needed to know why. I needed to see if the management at TechVantage was merely incompetent, or if they were something far worse. I began to walk toward the escalators, my sneakers squeaking faintly on the pristine tile. The mall was busy for a Saturday afternoon. I navigated through the crowd, dodging women with oversized shopping bags and men talking loudly into Bluetooth headsets. I felt the familiar weight of eyes sliding over me and then instantly discarding me. In this world, you were defined by your silhouette. If the silhouette didn't scream money, you were treated like a ghost. I reached the 2nd floor. The air here felt thinner, more expensive. This was the Platinum Corridor, home to the jewelry stores, the designer boutiques, and right at the end, occupying a prime 3,000 square foot corner unit TechVantage. The store was designed to intimidate. The entrance had no doors, just a wide, gaping maw framed by floor-to-ceiling glass panels. Inside, the lighting was stark and clinical, making the chrome and black gadgets gleam like artifacts in a museum. There were no clutter, no sale signs, no chaotic bins of discounted cables. Just sleek, minimalist tables displaying thousands of dollars worth of technology. I paused outside the threshold, my heart doing a slow, heavy thud against my ribs. It wasn't fear. I didn't fear anything I could buy and sell 10 times over, but a simmering anticipation. It was the feeling a hunter gets when he steps into the tall grass, knowing a predator is nearby. I watched the staff through the glass. They were dressed in sharp black slacks and tight, fitting azure polo shirts, moving with the practiced efficiency of sharks. I saw a young employee, barely 20, wiping a fingerprint off a tablet screen with the intensity of a surgeon scrubbing for an operation. I saw another associate standing by the register, his posture rigid, his eyes scanning the room not with helpfulness, but with suspicion. And then I saw him. He was standing near the back wall, by the home theater setups. He was older than the rest, maybe mid-40s, wearing a tie that was a shade too shiny and a suit jacket that was a size too tight across the shoulders. He had the kind of haircut that required expensive gel and very little self-awareness. He was gesturing wildly to a couple who looked terrified to touch anything, his smile failing to reach his cold, calculating eyes. Vincent, the manager. I knew his name from the lease agreements, but I had never seen him in the flesh. He looked exactly like the kind of man who would park in a handicapped spot, because he was just running in for a minute. He radiated a localized field of arrogance that was palpable even from 30 feet away. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of ozone and floor wax. I rolled my shoulders, loosening the tension in my neck. To Vincent, and to everyone inside that glass box, I was about to be just another broke nobody wasting their time. I was about to be a nuisance, a loiterer, a potential thief. I stepped across the threshold and into the lion's den. The change in atmosphere was immediate. The ambient noise of the mall fell away, replaced by a thrumming, electronic hum. The air inside the store was 5 degrees cooler than the corridor. I didn't make eye contact with anyone. I kept my head down, my hands in my pockets, and drifted toward the left, where the headphones were displayed on glowing acrylic stands. I could feel the sensors in the room shifting. I wasn't just a customer entering a store. I was a foreign object entering a sterile environment. I counted the seconds in my head. 1, 2, 3. It didn't take long. From the corner of my eye, I saw the shark in the azure polo shirt detach himself from the register. He didn't walk toward me with a smile. He didn't ask if I needed help finding anything. He moved with a direct, aggressive trajectory, cutting off my path to the deeper aisles. He stopped 5 feet away, pretending to straighten a row of phone cases, but his body was angled entirely toward me. He was blocking me, hurting me. I picked up a box of noise-canceling headphones, the flagship model, retailing for $400. I turned the box over, pretending to read the specs, but I was really watching the reflection in the glass cabinet in front of me. Behind me, the manager, Vincent, had stopped talking to the terrified couple. He was looking at me, his eyes narrowed, scanning my sneakers, my jeans, the pilling fabric of my hoodie. I saw his lip curl, a microscopic spasm of disgust. He said something to the employee next to him, a short, sharp command, and then began to walk in my direction. The game had begun. Chapter 2: The Vulture. I didn't turn around immediately. I kept my attention fixed on the headphone box, my thumb tracing the embossed silver lettering of the brand name. It was a good product, solid build, industry-leading active noise cancellation. I knew the specs by heart because I owned stock in the parent company. But right now, I had to play the part of the uneducated browser, the window shopper dreaming of things he couldn't touch. I sensed Vincent's approach before I heard it. It was a heavy, deliberate gait, the sound of hard-soled dress shoes striking the polished concrete floor with unnecessary force. He stopped about 10 feet away, hovering in my peripheral vision like a vulture waiting for a gazelle to stumble. He didn't speak to me. Not yet. That was part of the tactic, the silent pressure. He wanted me to feel his presence, to feel the weight of his judgment until I became uncomfortable enough to leave on my own. I ignored him. I put the box down, deliberately misaligning it slightly on the shelf, and moved 2 steps to the right to examine a pair of wireless earbuds. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Vincent twitch. He stepped forward, reached out, and aggressively corrected the alignment of the box I had just put down. He smoothed the front of the shelf with a sharp, snapping motion of his wrist, as if my touch had contaminated the merchandise. "Can I help you find something?" The voice was oily, pitched in a tone that sounded polite on the surface, but carried a jagged undercurrent of suspicion. It wasn't a question, it was a challenge. I turned slowly. Up close, Vincent was even more unpleasant than he had appeared from the doorway. His skin had the shiny, poreless look of someone who exfoliated too aggressively, and the smell of his cologne, something musky and chemical, hit me like a physical blow. His name tag pinned to his lapel was gold, distinct from the silver ones worn by the floor staff. "Vincent P., General Manager." "Just looking," I said, keeping my voice low, a little rough. I didn't smile. Vincent didn't blink. His eyes did a quick, vertical sweep of my body, hoodie, jeans, sneakers. He lingered on the frayed hem of my left pant leg. When his eyes came back up to mine, they were empty of any customer service warmth. They were dead, hard pebbles. "This is the high fidelity section," he said, his voice flat. He pointed a manicured finger at the display I was looking at. "These units are live. We prefer customers not to handle the merchandise unless they are prepared to make a purchase." I raised an eyebrow. "I can't look at the box." "You can look," Vincent said, a tight, artificial smile stretching his thin lips. "But we have a lot of sensitive inventory here. Accidents happen, and these items are expensive." He let the word expensive hang in the air, heavily italicized. The implication was clear. You can't afford to break it, so don't touch it. "I'll be careful," I said, turning back to the shelf. Vincent didn't leave. He stood his ground, crossing his arms over his chest. He was performing now, I realized. He was performing for his staff, showing them how to handle the riff-raff. I could feel the eyes of the young associate in the blue shirt on us, watching his boss with a mixture of fear and admiration. I decided to test the waters. I needed to see how deep the rot went. A few feet away, an elderly woman was struggling with a smartwatch display. She was small, frail, dressed in a simple floral coat that looked decades old. She was tapping the screen with a trembling finger, clearly confused by the interface. She looked up, scanning the room for help. Her eyes landed on Vincent. "Excuse me, sir," she called out, her voice thin and wavering. "I can't seem to get this too." Vincent didn't even turn his head. He kept his eyes locked on me, as if I were a ticking bomb that required his full attention. "Sir," the woman tried again. Vincent sighed, a loud, theatrical exhalation through his nose. He snapped his fingers without looking away from me. "Kyle!" he barked. "Azel 3. Assist the guest." The command was dismissive, treating the elderly woman as a nuisance to be delegated. Kyle, the young associate, hurried over, but his body language mirrored his boss's, impatient, stiff. I watched as Kyle tapped the screen rapidly, speaking too fast for the woman to follow, clearly trying to rush the interaction. Meanwhile, a man in a tailored charcoal suit walked in. He looked like he belonged on the cover of a business magazine. He wasn't even looking at the products. He was talking loudly on his phone about Q3 projections. Vincent's entire posture changed. The tension left his shoulders. He uncrossed his arms and practically pirouetted toward the suit. "Good afternoon, sir," Vincent called out, his voice suddenly rising an octave into a sickeningly sweet register. "Welcome to TechVantage. Please let me know if you need anything specific. We just got the new 8K panels in the back. I'd be happy to give you a private demo." The man in the suit ignored him, walking past without breaking his stride or his phone conversation. Vincent didn't look offended. He looked respectful. He nodded deferentially at the man's back. Then he turned back to me. The mask dropped instantly. The sneer returned. I felt a cold knot of anger tighten in my stomach. It wasn't just the rudeness, it was the precision of it. Vincent had a taxonomy of human worth in his head. The suit was a god. The old woman was an annoyance. And I, the man in the hoodie, was a parasite. I reached out and picked up a pair of reference monitors, heavy bookshelf speakers that retailed for about $1,200 a pair. They were beautiful pieces of engineering, with walnut cabinets and Kevlar woofers. I held one in my hands, feeling the weight, checking the binding posts on the back. Vincent moved so fast he almost blurred. He was in my personal space in a second, his breath hot and smelling of coffee and mints. He said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "I'm gonna ask you to put that down." "Now, I'm checking the inputs," I said calmly. "Does this model support balanced LR?" Vincent blinked. The question threw him. He clearly didn't know what a balanced XLR input was. He was a salesman of boxes, not technology. "It supports standard connections," he stammered, recovering quickly. "Look, pal, we don't want any trouble. These are precision instruments. The oils from your hands can damage the finish." "I'm sure the walnut is sealed," I said dryly. "That's not the point," Vincent snapped, his face flushing a mottled red. He stepped closer, invading my space aggressively. He was trying to intimidate me physically now, using his height and bulk to loom over me. "The point is, this store is for serious customers. We have a Best Buy down the street if you want to play with toys. This is a professional environment." "Are you asking me to leave?" I asked, looking him dead in the eye. Vincent paused. He knew he couldn't legally kick me out just for looking. He needed a reason. He needed a transgression. "I'm asking you to respect the merchandise," he said through gritted teeth. "And if you continue to handle items you have no intention of buying, I will have security escort you out for disrupting business." Disrupting business? I looked around the empty aisle. "I'm the only one here. You're making the other guests uncomfortable." Vincent lied smoothly. He gestured vaguely toward the front of the store, where the man in the suit was now leaving without having bought a thing. "We'll cultivate a certain aesthetic here. And frankly, you're not fitting the profile." Profile. There it was. He didn't even try to hide it. He was profiling me based on my clothes, my stubble, my silence. He had decided I was trash, and he was determined to take out the trash. I carefully placed the speaker back on the shelf. I made sure it was perfectly aligned, matching the one next to it down to the millimeter. "Okay," I said softly. "I'll keep my hands to myself." Vincent smirked. He thought he had won. He thought he had cowed me. He puffed his chest out, adjusting his tie with a smug satisfaction. "Good," he said. "See that you do. I'll be watching." He turned on his heel and walked back to his perch at the front of the store, but he didn't stop watching. He stood by the security monitors, his arms crossed, staring directly at me across the store. He was goading me. He wanted me to slip up. He was praying for me to give him an excuse. I looked at the speakers again. I looked at the high-resolution cameras mounted in the corners of the ceiling. Cameras that I knew fed directly to a server room in the basement of the mall. Vincent wanted a show. Fine, I would give him a show. But the ending wasn't going to be the one he expected. I turned and walked deeper into the store, toward the small accessories aisle, the cables, the memory cards, the phone chargers, the blind spots. I could feel Vincent's gaze burning a hole in the back of my hoodie. I was baiting the trap, and the vulture was circling, ready to dive. Chapter 3E. Can you afford to look at that? The accessories aisle was a narrow corridor of white plastic and blister packs, located near the rear of the store. It was the perfect choke point. From where I stood, I was partially obscured by a towering display of smart home hubs, but I had a clear line of sight to the front counter. Vincent was still there. He was talking to Kyle, the young associate, gesturing in my direction. I didn't need to be a lip reader to know what he was saying. Watch him. He's going for the small stuff. The easy steals. I felt a flash of cold, cynical amusement. Vincent was so convinced of his narrative that he was writing the script in real time. In his mind, I was already a thief. He was just waiting for the reality to catch up to his prejudice. I picked up a high-speed HDMI cable. It was overpriced. $80 for 6 feet of copper and shielding that cost $3 to manufacture. I turned the package over, pretending to study the gold-plated connectors through the plastic window. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a shadow move. Kyle had been deployed. He didn't approach directly. He shimmied down the parallel aisle, pretending to rearrange phone cases. He was terrible at it. Every 3 seconds, his head would pop up over the shelving unit like a nervous prairie dog, checking my position. I decided to make it easier for them. I put the HDMI cable back and picked up something smaller, a 1 TB microSD card. The package was tiny, the size of a playing card. It was the single most stolen item in retail electronics, high value, easily concealable. Holding it in my hand was like waving a red flag in front of a bull. I held the card up, bringing it close to my face as if reading the fine print. Then, I did something deliberate. I reached into my hoodie pocket with my other hand to pull out my phone. To an observer looking for a crime, the motion was ambiguous. Hand goes to pocket. Hand comes out. Did the card go in? Did it stay out? From 30 feet away, it was impossible to tell. I kept the card in my left hand, clearly visible if you were looking, and checked the time on my phone with my right. Then, I placed the card back on the hook. But Vincent hadn't seen me put it back. He had been distracted for a split second by the chime of the front door. By the time he looked back, I was walking away from the display, my hands back in my pockets. The trap was set. I moved toward the exit, walking slowly, casually. I kept my head down. I could feel the energy in the room shift.
"It was electric predatory, sir!"
The voice cracked like a whip across the quiet store. I stopped. I didn't turn around immediately. I stood 5 feet from the sensor gates, the glass doors of freedom just a few steps away. "Sir!" "Stop right there." I turned slowly. Vincent was marching toward me, moving with a speed that belied his heaviness. He was flushed, his eyes wide with the adrenaline of the hunt. Kyle was trailing behind him, looking anxious, clutching a walkie-talkie like a lifeline. "Is there a problem?" I asked. My voice was calm, almost bored. Vincent stopped 3 feet from me, blocking the exit. He was breathing hard, a mix of exertion and excitement. He looked like a man who had just won a lottery he had rigged himself. "You tell me," Vincent sneered. He looked at my pockets. "You want to empty those out for me." "Why would I do that?" I asked. "Because I know what you did," Vincent said, his voice rising. He wanted an audience. He wanted the few customers in the store to see this. "I saw you back there. The memory card. You put it in your pocket." "I didn't steal anything," I said. I kept my hands visible, palms open at my sides.
"I looked at it, I put it back. Don't lie to me!"
Vincent shouted. He stepped closer, entering my personal space again. "I've been watching you since you walked in. You've been casing the store for 20 minutes. You think I'm stupid. You think because you're wearing a hood you're invisible. I think you're making a mistake," I said quietly. "A very big mistake. The only mistake I made was letting you in here in the first place." Vincent spat. He looked at Kyle. "Call mall security. Tell them we have a shoplifter in custody." "I'm not in custody," I said, my voice hardening. "I'm leaving." I took a step toward the door. It was the trigger he had been waiting for.
"Oh, no, you don't!"
Vincent yelled. He lunged. It was clumsy and aggressive. He grabbed my left arm with both hands, his fingers digging into the bicep. He wasn't just stopping me, he was trying to swing me around, to physically dominate me. "Let go of me," I said. This was it, the point of no return.
"You're not going anywhere until you empty those pockets!"
Vincent screamed. He was shaking me now, pulling at my hoodie. The commotion had drawn a crowd. Outside in the mall corridor, people were stopping. They pressed their faces against the glass, phones already out, recording the spectacle. Inside the store, the couple from earlier was staring, wide-eyed. "Let go," I repeated, louder this time. "You are assaulting a customer."
"I am detaining a thief!"
Vincent roared. He was drunk on power now, playing the hero for the cameras he knew were rolling.
"Stop resisting!"
"Kyle, help me hold him!" Kyle hesitated. He looked at me, then at Vincent. He looked terrified. He didn't move. "Kyle!" Vincent screamed.
"Get over here!"
I didn't fight back. I didn't swing. I knew the protocol. If I hit him, I lost the high ground. I had to be the victim. I had to let him dig the hole so deep he would never see the sun again. I let him pull me. I let him shove me back toward the counter. I stumbled, my sneaker catching on the carpet edge, and I went down on one knee. Vincent didn't help me up. He pressed his advantage, keeping a hand on my shoulder, pinning me down.
"Stay down!"
He shouted, panting. "Don't you move." He looked up at the gathering crowd outside the glass, his chest heaving. He pointed a finger at me, addressing the audience like a ringmaster. "See this," he announced, his voice booming. "This is what happens when you try to steal from my store. We have zero tolerance for criminals." I looked up at him from the floor. My knee was throbbing where it had hit the tile. My hoodie was stretched out of shape. I felt the humiliation burning in my cheeks, a hot, prickly heat, but beneath the humiliation, there was something else, a cold, steel resolve. I looked at Vincent's name tag again, Vincent P. "You're going to regret this, Vincent," I said softly. He looked down at me and laughed. It was a harsh, ugly sound. "The only thing I regret," he sneered, leaning in close so only I could hear, "is that the cops aren't here yet to see you beg." He pulled his phone out and dialed 911. "Yeah," he said into the receiver, staring me dead in the eyes with a look of pure triumph. "I need police at Tech Vantage in Aurora Heights. I have a shoplifter. He became violent. I've got him detained, but I need backup immediately." He hung up and smirked. "Game over, pal." I sat on the floor, surrounded by the silence of the high-end electronics, and waited. He was right. The game was over. He just didn't realize he was the one who had lost. Chapter 4. The setup. The floor of the Tech Vantage store was cold. I could feel the chill seeping through the denim of my jeans, where my knee was pressed against the polished tile. From this vantage point, the world was a forest of table legs and the scuffed toes of Vincent's dress shoes. I didn't try to stand up. I stayed exactly where he had shoved me, one hand bracing myself on the ground, the other resting visibly on my thigh. It was a posture of submission, engineered to feed Vincent's ego. The more in control he felt, the more reckless he would become.
Kyle!
Vincent barked, not taking his eyes off me. "Stand by the door. Don't let anyone in. This is a crime scene now." Kyle, pale and looking like he might vomit, scuttled to the entrance. He stood guard, blocking the view of the growing crowd of onlookers outside, but he couldn't block the phones. I could see them through the glass. Dozens of black rectangles held aloft, little red recording lights blinking like fireflies. This was going viral. I knew it. By tonight, I would be a hashtag. FactTech Vantage incident. Phi Mall manager attack. Good. The Skyliner Group's PR team was going to have a nightmare of a Monday morning. But it was necessary. You can't excise a tumor without spilling a little blood. "You comfortable down there?" Vincent asked. He was pacing now, a tight circle around me, vibrating with adrenaline. He adjusted his cuffs, ran a hand through his gelled hair. He was posing. I looked up at him slowly. "I'm fine, Vincent. But you should know there are cameras." He scoffed, a short, sharp sound. "You think I don't know that? Who do you think reviews the footage?" "I do. And the footage is going to show a suspicious individual loitering, refusing to follow instructions, and then attempting to flee the scene with stolen property." "I didn't steal anything," I said again, calm and steady. "We'll see about that," he said. "When the cops get here, we'll turn your pockets inside out, and when we find that card, that's a felony, pal. Depending on the value, that's grand larceny in this state." He was bluffing about the law, trying to scare me. A $60 memory card wasn't grand larceny, but he wasn't interested in the legal code. He was interested in terror. "And if they don't find it?" I asked. Vincent stopped pacing. He squatted down, bringing his face level with mine. The smell of his cheap, musky cologne was overpowering. His eyes were wide, the pupils dilated. He looked deranged, high on the absolute power of his little fiefdom. "Then I'll tell them you ditched it," he whispered, a conspiratorial grin twisting his lips. "I'll tell them you tossed it under a shelf when I grabbed you. It's my word against yours. And look at you." He gestured vaguely at my hoodie, my stubble. "Who are they going to believe? The manager of the highest, grossing store in the district, or the bum who looks like he slept in a dumpster?" It was the raw, unvarnished truth of the world, spoken aloud. Justice was often just a contest of credibility, and credibility was often just a costume contest. "You're very confident," I observed. "I'm not confident," he corrected, standing back up and smoothing his jacket. "I'm right. People like you think you can just walk into places like this and take what you want. You think the rules don't apply to you because you're disadvantaged." He said the word disadvantaged like it was a slur. "But in here," he tapped his chest, "I am the law. This is my store, my inventory, my rules." The wail of sirens cut through the ambient noise of the mall. They were close. Vincent's smile widened. "Here comes the cavalry." He looked at me with genuine pity, a twisted form of benevolence. "Last chance, buddy. You hand it over now, confess, and maybe, I tell them to go easy on you." Save us all some paperwork. It was a classic interrogation tactic, the false lifeline. I have nothing to give you, I said. Vincent shook his head, disappointed. Have it your way. Hard way it is. The blue and red lights flashed against the glass storefront, reflecting off the pristine white walls. The crowd outside parted like the Red Sea. 2 uniformed officers strode through the entrance, their hands resting on their belts. I recognized the first one, Officer Miller. He worked the mall beat regularly. He was a big man, thick around the middle, with a face that looked permanently tired. The second was younger, sharper, with a high and tight haircut, Officer Davis. What do we have here, Vince? Miller asked, his voice heavy with boredom. He didn't even look at me. He looked straight at the manager. Vincent instantly transformed. The sneering bully vanished. In his place stood the concerned citizen, the weary guardian of commerce. He held his hands up in a gesture of helplessness. Officer, thank God you're here, Vincent said, his voice trembling slightly. It's been a nightmare. This individual, he pointed an accusing finger at me, was observed concealing merchandise. When I attempted to perform a standard bag check, he became belligerent. He tried to run. I had to restrain him for the safety of my other customers. Miller looked down at me. His eyes were flat, processing me as a problem to be solved, a box to be checked. That true, son? Miller asked. I stayed silent. He's not much of a talker, Vincent interjected quickly. He was shouting earlier, though, screaming about his rights. Scared the hell out of my cashier. He pointed at Kyle, who was still standing by the door, looking like he wanted to dissolve into the floor. Kyle nodded jerkily, terrified to contradict his boss. Officer Davis stepped forward. Sir, I'm going to need you to stand up slowly. Keep your hands where I can see them. I stood up, my knee popped audibly. I kept my hands raised, palms open. Turn around. Davis commanded. I turned. Hands behind your back. The cold steel of the handcuffs clicked around my wrists. The sound was final. The metal bit into my skin, tight and unforgiving. You are being detained on suspicion of shoplifting and assault. Davis recited the script. We're going to search you now. Go ahead, I said. Davis patted me down. He was thorough. He checked my waistband, my ankles. Then he reached into the front pocket of my hoodie. Vincent leaned forward, his eyes hungry. This was the moment, the reveal. Davis pulled his hand out. It was empty. Vincent blinked. Check the other one. Davis checked the other pocket. He pulled out my phone. That was it. Check his jeans, Vincent insisted, his voice pitching up.
The back pockets! He definitely put it in his pocket!
Davis checked my jeans. Wallet, keys, nothing else. The officer straightened up, holding my phone, wallet, and keys in his hand. He looked at Vincent. There's nothing on him, Vince. The silence that followed was heavy and thick. That's impossible. Vincent sputtered. The mask was slipping. The panic was starting to bleed through.
I saw him! He took a 1TB micro SD card! It's small.
He probably
tucked it into his sock! Or his underwear!
Officer Miller frowned. You want us to strip search him in the middle of the Apple store, Vince?
I want you to find the stolen property!
Vincent shouted. He was losing control.
Check the floor! Maybe he dropped it when I tackled him!
Maybe he kicked it under the display. Miller sighed. He shone his flashlight under the table next to where I had been kneeling. Dust bunnies. A stray staple. No memory card. Miller stood up and looked at Vincent with a new expression. Irritation. Vince, Miller said slowly, are you sure you saw him take it? Or did you just assume he took it?
I know what I saw!
Vincent insisted, but his voice was shrill now. He pointed at me again, jabbering. Look at him!
Look at how he's dressed! He came in here looking for trouble! He was casing the joint!
Profiling isn't evidence, Vince, Miller said, his tone cooling.
It's not profiling,
Vincent screamed.
It's experience! He's a thief! Check the cameras! I want you to arrest him!
He assaulted me. You said he assaulted you, Miller asked. But you're the one who tackled him.
He tried to run, Vincent lied.
That's fleeing the scene. That's resisting. I decided it was time to speak. Officer, I said. My voice was calm, clear, and carried a weight that cut through Vincent's hysteria. I would like to make a statement. Miller looked at me. For the first time, he really looked at me. He saw the calmness. He saw the lack of fear.
Go ahead, Miller said.
I entered the store at 2:15 p.m. I began. I examined a pair of headphones. I examined a speaker. I examined a memory card. I placed all items back on the shelf. When I attempted to leave, this man physically attacked me. He has detained me unlawfully for 15 minutes. He has made false statements to a law enforcement officer. I paused, letting the words sink in. And, I added, locking eyes with Vincent. He has done this in the flagship store of a property that I own. Vincent froze. What? Officer, I said, turning to Miller. Check my wallet. Look at the ID. Miller looked down at the wallet in his hand. He flipped it open. He looked at the driver's license. Then he looked at the black American Express Centurion card tucked behind it, the heavy titanium card that you can only get by invitation. He looked back at the ID, Elias Thorne. Miller's face went pale. He knew the name. Everyone in the city knew the name. Thorne was the Skyline Group. Thorne was the money behind half the downtown redevelopment. Thorne was the man who signed the donation checks for the Police Benevolent Fund. Miller looked up at me, his eyes wide. Mr. Thorne. Yes, I said. And I'd like you to call the number on the back of that business card in the wallet. It's my chief legal counsel. Tell him I'm currently in handcuffs in my own mall. Vincent laughed. It was a nervous, jagged sound. You've got to be kidding me.
This is a joke, right? A fake ID, he's a con artist.
Vince, Miller said, his voice quiet and deadly serious.
Shut up. But.
Shut up. Miller looked at Davis.
Get those cuffs off him. Now. No!
Vincent shouted, stepping forward.
You can't let him go! He's a criminal! Vincent,
I said. He stopped. The sound of his name, spoken with absolute, crushing authority, froze him in his tracks. You have 5 minutes to pack your personal belongings, I said. Because after that, you are permanently banned from this property. And if you set foot in Aurora Heights again, you will be arrested for trespassing. The color drained from Vincent's face so fast he looked like a corpse. You own the mall. I do, I said. And I'm evicting you. The silence in the store was absolute. Even the hum of the electronics seemed to stop. Then, from the pocket of my hoodie, my other phone began to ring. It was the distinct, loud ringtone I used for urgent business. That, I said to the stunned officers, will be my lawyer. You might want to answer that. Chapter 50, The Unmasking. The ringtone cut through the air, sharp and demanding. It was a stark contrast to the heavy, suffocating silence that had descended upon the store. Officer Miller looked at the phone in his hand as if it had turned into a live grenade. He looked at the caller ID, a Penhaligon, SQ, and then back at me. The color had not returned to his face. In fact, he looked like he was doing mental arithmetic regarding his pension and the likelihood of keeping it. Answer it, I said softly. I didn't make it a command. I made it a suggestion for his own survival. Miller pressed the green button and put it on speaker. His hand was shaking slightly. Officer Miller speaking, he croaked. The voice that came out of the tiny speaker was smooth baritone and sounded like it cost $1,000 an hour. Officer Miller, the voice said. This is Arthur Penhaligon, Chief Legal Counsel for the Skyline Group. I am currently tracking Mr. Thorne's device, which indicates he is at the Aurora Heights location. Why am I speaking to you and not my client? Miller swallowed. The sound was audible. Mr. Thorne is detained, sir. There was an allegation of shoplifting. Allegation, Penhaligon repeated. The word dripped with ice. By whom? Miller's eyes flicked to Vincent. The store manager, Vincent Peterson. I see, Penhaligon said. Officer Miller, are you aware that Mr. Thorne is currently conducting a scheduled, albeit covert, audit of his property? And are you aware that unlawful detention of a property owner on their own premises, without concrete evidence, exposes your precinct to significant liability? We didn't know who he was, Miller stammered. Ignorance is not a legal defense, officer. Is Mr. Thorne in handcuffs? Yes, sir. Remove them. Immediately. I am on my way. Do not let Mr. Peterson leave the premises. The line went dead. Officer Miller moved with a speed I hadn't thought him capable of. He nodded frantically at Officer Davis. Get them off. Now. Davis fumbled for his key. His hands were clumsy with nerves. He stepped behind me, muttering an apology that I barely heard. The metal clicked, the ratchet mechanism released, and the pressure on my wrists vanished. I brought my hands forward, rubbing the red indentations on my skin. The blood rushed back into my fingers, a painful, prickly sensation.
This is insane!
The scream came from Vincent. He had backed up against the counter, his face a rictus of disbelief and rage. He looked like a man watching his house burn down and blaming the fire department for the smoke. "You're listening to a guy on the phone," Vincent yelled, pointing a trembling finger at me.
Anyone can have a lawyer! That doesn't mean he didn't steal!
"You're letting a criminal go because he has a rich daddy." I turned to face him. I rolled my shoulders, adjusting my hoodie. I was no longer the huddled victim on the floor. I stood to my full height, and for the first time, Vincent seemed to realize that I was taller than him. "It's not a rich daddy, Vincent," I said calmly. "It's a holding company, and you're right to be worried." I walked over to Officer Miller and held out my hand. "My property, please." Miller handed me my wallet, my keys, and my phone. He placed them in my palm with the reverence of a religious offering. "Monsieur Thorne," Miller said, his voice low, "I want to apologize. We followed protocol based on the complainant's statement, but you profiled me." I cut him off. "You saw a hoodie and a manager in a tie, and you picked a side. We can discuss your training protocols later with the commissioner. Right now, I have business to attend to." I turned my attention to the counter. Kyle, the young employee, was shrinking into the corner, trying to become part of the drywall.
Kyle, I said. He jumped. Why? Yes.
"Log into the security system. I want the footage from the last 30 minutes burned to a drive, unedited." Now, Kyle looked at Vincent. Vincent's eyes were darting around the room, looking for an exit, a weapon, an argument, anything to stop the walls from closing in.
"Don't do it, Kyle!"
Vincent ordered.
"He has no authority here!"
"This is a private business. Actually," I said, reaching into my back pocket and pulling out a folded piece of paper. The lease addendum I carried for exactly these kinds of inspections. It's a tenant operating under a lease agreement with the Skyline Group. Clause 14, Section B of the landlord reserves the right to access any and all operational data, including security surveillance, in the event of a reported incident threatening the safety or reputation of the property. I unfolded the paper and slammed it onto the glass countertop. The sound echoed like a gunshot. "Log in, Kyle." Kyle didn't hesitate this time. He typed his password with trembling fingers. Vincent lunged. It was a desperate, stupid move. He scrambled over the counter, his hand reaching for the keyboard, trying to stop the backup, trying to delete the evidence of his own lie.
"Hey!"
Officer Davis shouted, but he didn't need to intervene. I was closer. I didn't hit him. I simply stepped into his path and braced myself. Vincent collided with me, bouncing off my shoulder like a bird hitting a windshield. He stumbled back, knocking over a display of overpriced phone cases. "That," I said, brushing off my sleeve, "is assault." Again, Vincent stood amidst the scattered plastic packaging, breathing heavily. His tie was crooked. His hair was coming undone. The veneer of the high-end manager was gone, revealing the scared, petty Tarrant beneath. "You set me up," he whispered. "You came in here trying to provoke me." "I came in here to buy headphones," I corrected him. "You provided the provocation. You provided the bias. You provided the handcuffs." Outside the glass, the crowd had grown. They weren't just filming now, they were cheering. They had seen the handcuffs come off. They had seen the manager crumble. The narrative had flipped in real time, and the court of public opinion was already rendering its verdict. I looked at the officers. "I want to file charges. False imprisonment, filing a false police report, assault." Vincent's knees seemed to give way. He slumped against the counter, sliding down until he was sitting on the floor. The exact same spot where he had forced me to kneel only minutes ago. "You can't do this," he whimpered. "I have a mortgage. I have kids." It was the first time he had mentioned anything human. It was the first time he hadn't spoken about policy, or profit, or profiles. I looked down at him. I felt a flicker of something, not sympathy but pity. The pity you feel for a rabid dog that has to be put down. "You should have thought about that before you tackled a customer for looking poor," I said. Kyle placed a USB drive on the counter. It's done, sir. I picked up the drive." It was light plastic, insignificant, but it contained the end of Vincent's career. "Thank you, Kyle," I said. "You can go home for the day. You're getting paid for the full shift." I turned to the officers. "Take his statement. I'll wait for my lawyer outside." I walked toward the door. The automatic glass panels slid open with a soft whoosh. As I stepped out into the mall corridor, the silence of the store was replaced by a roar of noise. The onlookers parted for me, but this time it wasn't out of judgment. It was out of awe. I didn't look back at Vincent. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what he looked like. He looked like a man who had just realized that the glass walls of his kingdom were actually the walls of a cage. But this wasn't over. Vincent was a cornered animal, and cornered animals bite. I checked my phone. The video of my arrest was already trending. Han Mal manager Karen Farora Heights Justice. I slipped the phone back into my pocket. The first act was finished, but the war was just beginning. Vincent wouldn't go quietly. I knew his type. He would find a way to blame me. He would find a way to sue.
Good, let him try.
I had time. And I had the receipts. Chapter 6C, the counterstrike. Vincent did not go quietly into the night. The following Monday morning, the firing was efficient and brutal. My legal team served the termination of the franchise agreement to TechVantage corporate headquarters at 9:00 a.m. By 9:15 a.m., corporate had fired Vincent for gross misconduct and violation of company values. By 10:00 a.m., the locks were being changed at the Aurora Heights location. For a week, there was silence. I assumed Vincent was licking his wounds, perhaps updating his LinkedIn profile to omit the last 5 years of his employment. I went back to my office on the 42nd floor, back to the suits, back to the clean, shaven face. The incident became a line item in a weekly report. Risk management case Fay42 resolved. I underestimated the depth of his delusion. It started with a blip on my PR team's radar. A local news segment on Channel 5, David Viz Goliath, one manager's fight against billionaire bullying. I watched the clip in my office, a cup of espresso growing cold in my hand. Vincent sat in a studio chair, wearing a soft cardigan instead of his sharp suit. He looked humble, broken. His hair was unstyled. Beside him sat a man who looked like a shark that had evolved to walk on land. His lawyer, Marcus Vane. Vane was a bottom feeder known for frivolous lawsuits and maximizing settlement payouts. I was just doing my job, Vincent said to the sympathetic interviewer, wiping a dry eye. We had a string of thefts, high-value items. I was on edge. And then this man comes in acting suspicious, hiding his face. I didn't know he was the owner. I just saw a threat to my staff. And you claim the footage was manipulated? The interviewer asked. Vane cut in, his voice smooth and practiced. We have reason to believe the security tapes provided by the Skyline Group were selectively edited. Key moments where Mr. Thorne provoked my client, verbally threatened him, in fact, are missing. This is a classic case of a powerful billionaire destroying a working class man to stroke his own ego. It's class warfare, pure and simple. I stared at the screen. The audacity was breathtaking. He was flipping the script. He was using the very class divide he had weaponized against me, but now he was the victim. My intercom buzzed. It was Penhaligon. You seeing this? Elias? I am, I said, my voice tight. He filed the suit this morning, Penhaligon said. Wrongful termination, defamation of character, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and assault. He's asking for $5 million. $5 million. I let out a dry laugh. For tackling me. For ruining his life based on a misunderstanding. Penhaligon corrected. He's claiming PTSD. Says he can't work. Says the viral video, which we didn't release, by the way, the public did, has made him a pariah because you didn't stop the police from arresting him initially. I told them to uncuff me, I said. He says you waited too long. He says you enjoyed it. That it was entrapment. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the city. The logic was twisted, sick, and effective. In the court of public opinion, billionaires are guilty until proven innocent. Vincent was banking on a settlement. He knew I would pay a few $100,000 just to make the headache go away. What's our move, Arthur? Standard procedure is to settle, Penhaligon said pragmatically. It's cheaper than a trial. We offer him $50,000, a non-disclosure agreement, and he goes away. I looked at the city below, my city. I thought about the way Vincent had looked at me when I was on my knees. I thought about the way he had looked at the old woman he ignored. I thought about the look in Officer Miller's eyes when he realized he had backed the wrong horse. If I paid him, he won. If I paid him, He would go on thinking that he could bully people and get a golden parachute when he got caught. He would learn nothing.
No, I said.
Elias?
Penhaligon warned. A trial is messy. It keeps the story in the news cycle. It could damage the brand. The brand is integrity, I said. If we pay him, we're admitting we did something wrong. We're validating his lie. So you want to fight? I don't want to fight, I said, turning back to the desk. I want to destroy him, legally, completely.
I want a countersuit. On what grounds? Defamation.
Malicious prosecution. And I want to audit his store's books, every transaction for the last 5 years. That's a fishing expedition, Elias. He profiled me as a thief, I said. Psychological projection is a powerful thing, Arthur. A man that paranoid about theft is usually worried about it for a reason. Find out why. There was a pause on the line. Then I heard the smile in Penhaligon's voice. I'll put the forensic accountants on it within the hour. I hung up. The slow burn was over. The explosion had happened. Now we were walking through the fallout. The next few months were a grind. Vincent's team played dirty. They leaked stories to the tabloids about my erratic behavior. They dug up a speeding ticket I had gotten in college. They tried to paint me as an out of touch elitist who hunted poor managers for sport. I stayed silent. I didn't give interviews. I didn't tweet. I let them punch themselves out. Meanwhile, my forensic team was dissecting TechVantage's internal server. We found the inventory discrepancies, small things at first, a missing iPad here, a few headphones there, attributed to shrinkage, the retail term for theft. But then we found the pattern. The shrinkage always happened on Tuesday mornings, the days Vincent opened the store alone. And then we found the returns, high-value items returned for cash, processed by Vincent's login ID, but with no customer data attached, just generic entries, Guest. It was a classic skimming operation. He was stealing inventory, marking it as lost or returned, and pocketing the difference. He wasn't just a bigot, he was a thief. He had projected his own criminality onto me because he saw the world through the lens of his own guilt. We had the smoking gun, but we didn't fire it yet. We waited for the deposition. 3 months later, I sat across a mahogany table from Vincent and Marcus Vane. A court reporter sat at the end typing silently. A video camera recorded every twitch of Vincent's face. Vincent looked confident. He was wearing a new suit, bought, presumably, on credit against his future settlement. He smiled at me, a smug, oily smile. He thought he had me cornered. He thought I was there to write a check. Mr. Peterson, Penhaligon began, opening a thick file folder. You claim that your actions on the day in question were motivated solely by a desire to protect the store's inventory. Is that correct? Absolutely, Vincent said, leaning into the microphone. I take my fiduciary responsibility very seriously, and you have never taken company property for personal use. Never, Vincent said. He didn't even blink. And you have never falsified return records. Of course not. And you have never, Penhaligon paused, pulling a single sheet of paper from the file, sold missing inventory on a private eBay account registered to your home address under the username VinceTech88. The room went dead silent. Vincent's face didn't just pale, it disintegrated. The smugness vanished, replaced by the hollow, terrifying realization of a man who has stepped off a cliff and is just now noticing gravity. Marcus Vane snatched the paper from Penhaligon's hand. He scanned it. His eyes widened. He looked at his client. We have the IP logs, Vincent, Penhaligon said softly. We have the bank transfers. We have the PayPal records linking the sales to your personal checking account. You stole over $50,000 of merchandise from your own store over 3 years. Vincent opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked at his lawyer. Vane closed his folder. He put his pen in his pocket. He looked at Vincent with pure disgust. We're done here, Vane said. What? Vincent squeaked.
I can't represent you,
Vane said, standing up. You lied to me. This is perjury. I'm withdrawing as counsel.
You can't leave me,
Vincent screamed, grabbing Vane's sleeve.
They're lying! It's a setup!
Vane shook him off. Good luck, Mr. Peterson. Vane walked out. I sat there watching Vincent. He was alone. The camera was still rolling. The court reporter was still typing. Mr. Peterson, I said. He looked at me. His eyes were wet. He was trembling. We are amending our countersuit, I said. We are adding civil theft and fraud. and we are turning this file over to the district attorney." Vincent put his head in his hands and began to sob. It wasn't the dignified crying he had done on TV. It was the ugly, snotty crying of a child who realizes the punishment is finally actually coming. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel triumph. I just felt clean. The infection had been found. The rot had been excised. I stood up. "See you in court, Vincent." I walked out of the conference room, leaving him to the silence of the recording tape and the ruin of his own making. The 50-minute mark of his life was up. The credits were about to roll. Chapter 70, The Walk of Shame. The silence in the conference room was no longer the heavy, suffocating atmosphere of a legal battle. It was the hollow, echoing silence of a tomb. Vincent sat alone at the long mahogany table. His hands were gripping the edge of the wood, so tightly his knuckles were white, resembling bleached bone. The video camera's red light blinked steadily, a robotic eye recording the disintegration of a man who thought he was untouchable. "Monsieur Thorne," Vincent whispered. His voice was cracked, unrecognizable from the booming baritone he had used to humiliate me in the store. "Please, we can work something out." I didn't sit back down. I stood by the door, my hand on the brass handle. "The time for working things out was when you accused me of a felony to cover your own incompetence, Vincent. Or perhaps when you filed a frivolous lawsuit to extort me." I was desperate, he pleaded, tears streaming down his face, dripping onto his expensive lapel. The store, the numbers were slipping. I just needed a little cushion. I was going to pay it back, I swear. It was the classic refrain of the embezzler. I was going to pay it back. They never do. They just dig the hole deeper, shoveling the dirt onto everyone around them, until the ground collapses. "You stole $50,000, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "And then you spent another $10,000 on legal fees, trying to destroy the reputation of the man who signed your checks. That isn't desperation, Vincent. That's arrogance." I opened the door. The hallway outside was bright, lined with glass walls that looked out over the city skyline. "Where are you going?" Vincent asked, panic spiking in his voice. He stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. He didn't want to be left alone with the court reporter and the evidence. "I'm going back to work," I said. "I suggest you do." "Well, I actually don't know what you're going to do. But you can't stay here." Vincent wiped his face with his sleeve, smearing snot and tears. He took a deep breath, trying to reassemble the fragments of his dignity. He adjusted his tie. He smoothed his hair. It was a pathetic reflex action. He was trying to put the mask back on, but the straps were broken. "Fine," he spat, a sudden flash of his old venom returning. "Ruin me. See if I care. I'll go to the press. I'll tell them you fabricated the bank records. I'll tell them." "Vincent," I interrupted gently. "The press is already downstairs. Your PR team called them, remember? You wanted a statement after the deposition to control the narrative." Vincent froze. He had forgotten. He had summoned the wolves thinking he would be feeding them my corpse. Now, he was the meat. I can spin this," he muttered, mostly to himself. "I'll say we're in settlement talks. I'll say it went well." He pushed past me, desperate to get to the cameras, to get his version of the truth out before the real truth could catch up. He walked down the corridor with a shaky, manic energy, rehearsing his lines under his breath. I followed him, maintaining a respectful distance. I took my phone out and sent a single text message to Penhaligon, who was waiting in the lobby. "He's coming down." The elevator ride was excruciating. Vincent stared at the numbers counting down, tapping his foot rhythmically. He refused to look at me. He was in survival mode, his brain constructing a new reality where he was still the victim, still the hero, still the good guy. The doors slid open on the ground floor. The lobby of the Skyline Tower was a cavernous space of marble and light. And, as predicted, it was full of reporters. There were camera crews from 3 major networks, microphones on boom poles, and a gaggle of freelance photographers. Vincent had done a good job of selling his David vs. Goliath story. They were hungry for a quote. Vincent stepped out of the elevator. He squared his shoulders. He put on a brave, tragic face, the face of the downtrodden working man fighting the system. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice projecting across the lobby. He walked toward the microphones, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "Thank you for coming." Today's deposition was grueling, but we remained confident that the truth. Vincent Peterson. The voice didn't come from a reporter. It came from the side of the room, near the security desk. Vincent stopped. He turned. Two men in cheap suits stood there. They weren't wearing the sharp navy of my legal team, nor the chaotic casual wear of the press. They wore the rumpled, wary polyester of the city fraud division. One of them stepped forward, flashing a badge that caught the light of the camera flashes. "I'm Detective Henderson," the man said. "We have a warrant for your arrest." The cameras, which had been focused on Vincent's face, instantly widened their shots to include the detectives. The shutter clicks accelerated, sounding like a swarm of angry cicadas. "Arrest." Vincent laughed a high-pitched, nervous sound. "This is a misunderstanding. I'm in the middle of a civil dispute. You can't." "It's not about the civil suit, Mr. Peterson," Henderson said, closing the distance. "This is for grand larceny, wire fraud, and falsifying business records. We received the evidence package from the district attorney regarding the TechVantage accounts." Vincent backed up. No, that's impossible. That's fake. He made it up." He pointed a shaking finger at me, standing quietly by the elevator banks.
He's doing this! He's buying the police!
"Turn around, please," Henderson said, pulling a pair of handcuffs from his belt. The sight of the silver medal broke him. It was a poetic mirror image of the moment in the store. Months ago he had stood over me while I was cuffed, grinning with triumph. Now, the world watched as he was the one being restrained. "Don't touch me!" Vincent shrieked, batting the detective's hand away. It was a mistake. The detectives didn't have the patience of retail workers. Henderson spun Vincent around, forcing his arm behind his back with practiced efficiency. Vincent slammed chest first into a marble pillar. "Stop resisting!" Henderson barked. The cuffs clicked. Snick, snick. The sound echoed through the lobby, captured by a dozen microphones.
You're making a mistake!
Vincent screamed as they hauled him upright.
I'm the victim here!
"I'm the victim." The press was in a frenzy. Questions were being shouted, but not the ones Vincent wanted to hear. "Mr. Peterson, did you steal from your own store? Is it true you sold inventory online?"
Vincent, look this way!
He looked wild, disheveled, and utterly defeated. As the detectives marched him toward the revolving doors, he locked eyes with me one last time. There was no arrogance left, no sneer, just the terrifying realization that he had burned down his own life to light a cigarette. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I just watched him go. As the revolving doors spun him out into the back of a waiting squad car, Arthur Penhaligon stepped up beside me. He watched the spectacle with the mild disinterest of a man who had seen it all before. "That went well," Arthur noted dryly. "It went exactly as it had to," I said. "The press is going to want a statement from you, Elias. They're realizing they backed the wrong horse. They want the redemption arc now." I looked at the reporters, who were now turning their lenses toward me, hungry for the next sound bite. They wanted the billionaire to gloat. They wanted the moral of the story. "No statement," I said, turning back toward the elevators. "The video speaks for itself. Release the full deposition transcript to the public tonight. Let them read his confession in his own words." "And where are you going?" Arthur asked. I pressed the button for the garage. "I'm going to the mall," I said. "I have a store to fix." The doors closed, shutting out the noise, the flashbulbs, and the wreckage of Vincent Peterson. The elevator began to rise, smooth and silent. The revenge was over. The vindication was public, but the real work, the work of scrubbing the stain he had left behind, was just beginning. I took off my tie, unbuttoned my collar, and leaned my head back against the mirrored wall. For the first time in 6 months, the silence felt peaceful. Chapter 80, The Ghost in the Machine. The Aurora Heights Mall was different on a Tuesday morning. Without the weekend crowds, the space felt vast and skeletal, a cathedral waiting for its congregation. The air conditioning hummed a low, constant note, and the smell of floor wax was sharper, more chemical. I wasn't wearing the hoodie today. I wasn't wearing the suit either. I wore a simple black polo shirt and dark jeans, the uniform of a working man, a manager, someone who was there to get things done. I walked the platinum corridor toward the empty storefront that used to be TechVantage. The windows were papered over with opaque white vinyl, blocking the view inside. A small sign on the glass reads Silo Stafar Renovanayo and EW Management Common. So I unlocked the glass door with the key the police had recovered from Vincent's personal effects. Inside, the store was a ghost town. The sleek tables were dusty, the high-end headphones were gone, boxed up and shipped back to the manufacturer during the liquidation. The air was stale, smelling of ozone and abandonment. I walked to the center of the room, standing on the exact spot where Vincent had tackled me. The carpet tile was still slightly scuffed. I nudged the mark with the toe of my boot. "Mr. Thorne." The voice was tentative, coming from the back office. I turned. Standing in the doorway of the stockroom was Kyle. He looked older than he had 6 months ago. The baby fat had melted from his cheeks, leaving him looking tired and weary. He was wearing civilian clothes, a graphic tee and cargo shorts. I had rehired him personally after the franchise collapsed, keeping him on the payroll as a consultant to help with the inventory audit. "Morning, Kyle," I said. "How does it look?" Kyle walked out holding a tablet. He didn't make eye contact at first. The trauma of the last few months still hung over him. He had been Vincent's favorite target, the kid who was too scared to say no, too desperate for the paycheck to quit. It's messy, sir," Kyle said. "I went through the back stock like you asked. The physical count is off by even more than the accountants thought. There are whole boxes of flagship phones that were marked received, but never scanned into the sales floor inventory." "Where did they go?" "Vincent's car trunk, mostly," Kyle said quietly. "He used to have me load defective units into his sedan on Tuesday nights. He said he was taking them to the waste recycling center himself to save on shipping costs."
I believed him. "You were 19, Kyle!"
I said gently. "And he was your boss. You trusted the authority." "I should have said something," Kyle murmured, looking at the floor. "When he tackled you, I knew he was lying. I knew you didn't take anything. But I just stood there. Fear is a powerful silencer," I said. "But you're speaking now. That's what matters." I walked over to the main counter, the fortress where Vincent had held court. I ran my hand along the cool glass. "We're reopening in 2 weeks," I said. Kyle looked up, surprised. "We are, but the franchise agreement is dead. Corporate pulled the license." "I bought the license," I said. "Skline Group is taking over the location directly. No more franchise owners, no more middlemen." "Who's going to manage it?" Kyle asked. I looked at him. "I'm looking for someone who knows the inventory. Someone who knows the customers. Someone who knows exactly what not to do." Kyle's eyes went wide. He shook his head frantically. No way. I'm just a sales associate. I'm a kid. I can't run a store like this." Vincent had an MBA and 20 years of experience, I pointed out, and he used it to steal 50 grand and assault a customer. Experience doesn't equal competence, Kyle, and it certainly doesn't equal character. I pulled a folder from the counter. Inside was a contract. "Store manager," I read. "Starting salary is $85,000 a year, plus full benefits and profit sharing. But there are conditions." Kyle stared at the paper as if it were a bomb. "What conditions?" "1, I said, holding up a finger. "No profiling. Ever. If a kid walks in here with holes in his shoes, you treat him like he's buying a yacht. If an old lady needs help with her phone, you spend an hour with her if that's what it takes. We sell technology, but our business is dignity." Kyle nodded slowly. "Okay, I can do that." 2, I continued. "You hire back the rest of the staff Vincent fired or drove away, the ones who wouldn't play his games. You build a team that actually looks like the community we serve." "I know exactly who to call," Kyle said, a ghost of a smile appearing. "And 3, I said, tapping the scuff mark on the carpet with my foot. "You leave this here. The scuff. Don't replace this tile. Put a display over it if you have to, but keep it. It's a reminder." "A reminder of what?" "Of what happens when you forget who you're serving," I said. I uncapped a pen and laid it on the contract. "It's a big job, Kyle. It's going to be hard. The press will be watching this store like hawks. They're waiting for us to fail. They're waiting for the cursed location to implode again." Kyle looked at the contract. He looked at the empty store. He took a deep breath, his chest expanding. For the first time, he didn't look like a scared kid. He looked like a young man tired of being pushed around. "I won't let you down, Mr. Thorne," he said. He picked up the pen and signed. I watched him. It was a small victory, perhaps. Just one store in one mall in one city, but it felt more significant than the billion-dollar deals I signed in boardrooms. This was repair. This was restoration. Good, I said, taking the contract back. Now, get to work. You've got a lot of boxes to unpack. I turned to leave, but stopped at the door.
Oh, and Kyle!
Yes, sir. If a guy in a hoodie walks in next week and starts playing with the headphones, let him be. Kyle laughed. It was a genuine, relieving sound. I'll give him the employee discount. I walked out into the corridor. The paper on the windows was still up, but I could picture the future clearly. The rot was gone. The foundation was solid. I pulled my phone out. I had one last loose end to tie up, one last visit to make. The screen showed a notification from the Department of Corrections. Inmate visitation request approved. Vincent wanted to see me. It was a trap, of course, or a plea, or a final attempt to spit in my face. But I owed it to the story to see the ending. I owed it to the slow burn, to see the ash. I headed toward the parking garage. The silence of the mall felt different now. It didn't feel bought. It felt earned. Chapter 90, The Cage of His Own Making. The county detention center was a stark contrast to the polished marble and glass of Aurora Heights. Here, everything was painted a suffocating shade of institutional gray. The air smelled of industrial cleaner and stale sweat. I sat in the visitation booth, separated from the other side by a thick sheet of scratched plexiglass. The phone receiver in my hand was heavy, the plastic greasy against my ear. Vincent was led in by a guard. He looked smaller. The expensive suit was gone, replaced by a bright orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. His hair, once gelled into an immovable helmet, was limp and graying at the temples. He hadn't shaved in days. He sat down heavily, avoiding my gaze for a long moment. When he finally looked up, I expected hate. I expected the burning, arrogant rage I had seen in the store. Instead, I saw exhaustion. He picked up the phone. "You came," he said. His voice was tinny through the receiver, stripped of its bluster. "You asked to see me," I replied. "I wanted to." He hesitated, licking dry lips. "I wanted to know why. Why did you go so hard? You have billions. You could have just fired me. You could have just banned me. Why the forensic audit? Why the felony charges? You still don't get it," I said, leaning forward. "You think this is about me being petty. You think this is about me flexing my power, isn't it?" Vincent asked, a flash of his old bitterness surfacing. "You wanted to crush the little guy." "You weren't the little guy, Vincent," I said. "That old woman you ignored. She was the little guy. The kid working the register that you bullied into silence. He was the little guy. You were the tyrant. You were just a tyrant in a small kingdom." Vincent looked away, staring at the scarred table surface. I was under pressure. The district targets were impossible. I did what I had to do to keep the numbers up. "You did what was easy," I corrected him. "You stole because you felt entitled to it, and you profiled me because you needed a villain to justify your own paranoia. You looked at me and decided I was trash so you could feel like a king." "I lost everything," he whispered. "My house. My wife left. She took the kids to her sisters in Ohio. I have nothing. You have the consequences of your actions," I said. "It's the only thing that's truly yours." He looked at me with wet eyes.
"I'm going to prison, Elias. Real prison. 3 to 5 years. You'll survive," I said.
"You're a manager, Vincent. You'll find a way to organize the laundry duty or run the commissary. Just don't steal from the inventory this time." He let out a short, choked laugh. It was a miserable sound. "Is that it? You came here to give me career advice?" "No," I said. "I came here to give you this." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a photograph. I pressed it against the glass. It was a picture of the grand reopening of the TechVantage store, the ribbon cutting. Kyle was in the center, holding the giant scissors, looking proud and professional in a suit that actually fit him. Behind him stood the new team, diverse, smiling, genuinely happy. The store was packed with customers. "The store is doing better numbers now than it ever did under you," I said. "Legitimate numbers. No skimming, no lies, just good service." Vincent stared at the photo. He stared at Kyle, the boy he had tormented, now standing in his place. "He's a kid," Vincent muttered. "He doesn't know what he's doing." "He knows how to treat people," I said. That turns out to be the most important metric. I put the photo away. Goodbye, Vincent. I hung up the phone. Vincent slammed his hand against the glass. He shouted something, but without the phone he was silenced. I saw his mouth moving.
Forming the words, "It's mine! It should be mine!"
I stood up and walked away. I didn't look back. I left him screaming at a reflection of himself, trapped in a box, just like he had tried to trap me. Chapter 100: The Quiet Kingdom. 6 months later, I was back at Aurora Heights. It was a Saturday. I was wearing the hoodie again. The same charcoal one, though I had finally stitched the frayed hem. I walked through the atrium, listening to the hum of the mall. It was busy. The energy was different. It felt lighter. I took the escalator to the second floor. I walked past the jewelry stores and the boutiques until I reached the corner unit. The TechVantage sign was gleaming. The glass was spotless. Inside, the store was bustling. I didn't go in. I didn't need to inspect it. I trusted the manager. Instead, I stood by the railing, looking down at the fountain below. I watched the people. A group of teenagers laughed as they shared a pretzel. A young father chased a toddler who had escaped his grasp. An elderly couple walked arm in arm, eating ice cream. They didn't know who I was. They saw a guy in a hoodie, leaning on a railing. They didn't see the owner. They didn't see the billionaire. And that was fine. I saw a security guard rolling by on a Segway. It was a new guy. He slowed down as he approached me. He looked at my hoodie. He looked at my sneakers. I tensed just for a second. The old instinct. The guard stopped. He smiled. "Afternoon, sir," he said. "Can I help you find anything today?" I smiled back. A genuine smile. "No thanks," I said. "I'm just looking." "No problem," the guard said. "Enjoy your day." He rolled on. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of cinnamon buns and expensive perfume. It smelled like commerce. It smelled like peace. I checked my phone. I had a board meeting on Monday. A new acquisition in Tokyo. A skyscraper development in Dubai. The wheels of the Skyline Group never stopped turning. But for now, for this moment, I was just Elias. I put my phone in my pocket. I pulled my hood up, and I walked into the crowd, disappearing into the anonymity of my own kingdom, finally, truly vindicated.